everyone. Coach Sullivan here with MGS Coaching Football. To my subscribers, I thank you, and to those who haven't yet, hope you do. I just completed my 38th year coaching football. I was a defensive coordinator, but over that time, I've been an offensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, longtime head coach, all of this at both the collegiate and high school levels. Today in this presentation, I want to talk to you about one of our pistol games that we call U. Probably help if I wrote it there. All right. U, and how we can execute it out of multiple fronts. In fact, I have 4 different fronts illustrated here for you. Okay. So some of the key terms here that we're going to learn about today. What is a pistol game? Well, it's a 2-man pass rush line stunt. It has to be first level, which means people along the front opposite the offensive line, first level defenders. So that's no inside linebackers. It's nobody coming from, deeper than the defensive line. Otherwise, it would be a blitz. U is a 2-man game to the rover, okay? And it usually involves the defensive end or the rover, but we word it so it's the inside and outside defender in the front, as you'll see, okay? Outside cage is a pass rush lane aiming point that we use to contain, all right, of the quarterback. So you've got to teach your players to base everything off of the quarterback set. He's set here is different than if he's set here. And so outside cage is 2 yards outside that set. And you got to teach your kids to adjust to it. It's very easy to do in drills as part of individual, throughout the preseason, in season, all right? It's part of our everyday drills for our defensive line. Inside cage is also a pass rush lane aiming point, except it's the near armpit. So if I'm rushing from this side, it's this armpit. If I'm rushing from this side, it's this armpit. Okay? So again, you got to teach your kid, quarterback set here is different than if he's set here, which is different than if he's right. The armpit moves, as does the outside cage. What the loop is, it's a 2-man pass line stunt, so the loop is the second of the 2, which makes him the read defender, which brings in the butt side rule, which means the read defender is of the designated blocker. So we're going to teach you how we designate who that is. It's actually very simple once I do that. And then how you can change who that designated blocker is. Okay, it's very, very simple, as you'll see. It's this is the designated blocker unless, okay, which is how we try to handle everything. And then what we call stab. In this particular pistol game, we have the inside defender is executing the stab, okay? And the stab simply is speed rush in B gap. Stab, S, speed, rush, B, right? Think of the word stab. Starts with an S, ends with a B. It's speed rush into B gap. So the word stab means that. Speed rush into B gap. Right? Speed rush is usually an outside rush. Not in this stunt. Stab is we are speed rushing B gap. The inside defender, okay? And the aiming point's the near hip of the blocker. So let me first talk to you about how we determine who the designated blocker is. So it's this. Remember, we're an odd front, right? The designated blocker is always the guard on the side of the call, okay? Always the guard on the side of the call, unless the guard on the side of the call is covered and the center is uncovered. Okay? The designated blocker is always the guard on the side of the call, unless the guard is covered and the center is uncovered. Then it becomes the center. Okay? So if both the guard on the play side, on the call side, and the center are covered, then it remains the guard. Guard unless. Okay? Guard on the side of the call unless. And then that's just as if the center's uncovered. And I give you one front where the center is in fact uncovered. Okay? So that's how we determine who the designated blocker is that the looper reads. So up top, I have 2 different fronts versus 11 personnel. On the bottom, I have 2 different fronts versus 10 personnel, on purpose. The only thing I'm going to illustrate in terms of protection, I want to make sure I got the good color going here, is the designated blocker. I'm not going to do anything else with protection. The only one of the 4 that has a back illustrated is the split front, because the split front, the rover lines up based upon the back. Okay, in this particular case, when we're in 10 personnel. All right, otherwise, no back. Okay, so we're ready to go. Again, remember, designated blocker, guard, call side, unless center's uncovered. All right, here we go. So up here, right, Lucky Ringo to the rover. Right? This is a 2-man game to the rover. It involves the rover unless rover's not in the front, which I give you one of our fronts where the rover's not on the front. Okay? So up here, designated, right? Guard, uncovered, call side, it's Lucky. So I have the guard in red. All right, so first of all, right, stab, D end or inside defender. So here's the D end, stab and B gap. So the D end is stab and B gap, which means speed rush. Getting vertical. Okay, when the aiming point is just the first step is at the near hip of the guard, then it's getting vertical in the B gap. You're trying not to get a whole lot of contact with the tackle, with the guy you're on. Right? So the aiming point is just for the initial step, and then it's a speed rush in the B gap. And that's it for him for now. So in this case, I'm going to have the guard fanning out to try and help with the stab. So now here comes the looper, right? The looper, it's a hard outside step. And then he goes butt side. So the guard's coming to him, butt side is in the A gap. And the only other difference would be if the guard stayed square like this, he'd still go in the A gap. So let's say the guard was there because he's double read. Inside linebacker, outside linebacker. So he's square. He's still going into the A gap. All right, boom, done. And that's how it works. So remember, first, second. That makes the rover the looper. And there it is. So the outside cage, and I'm only going to talk about it on this one diagram, it remains the same all the time. If the quarterback, who I'm going to now do the little drop in blue, the quarterback got the ball and essentially set up, stayed behind the center. Now, as the defensive end in this case, or the inside stab defender, right? Speed rush and B gap. Once he penetrates, he's got to find immediately. Eyes have to locate the set of the quarterback. We call this in a definite, obvious passing situation. Okay, I have used it in situations to help defeat ISO play versus 2-back. I mean, that's kind of out of desperation, to be honest, or a zone scheme, but this is typically called versus a passing situation that we've determined based on our opponent's tendencies. Okay, so now the stab defender, speed rush and B gap, you got to identify where that set is and then be 2 yards outside cage, never going deeper than the quarterback. Same for your rover. As they're doing this, and everything has to be full speed on the run. It can't be, slow down. Obviously reacting full speed, and then once you've made the decision, you're ripping through A gap. Now the eyes have to locate the quarterback so they can find that near armpit. So you can set outside cage. Okay, I've got all kinds of presentations. I got drills that we use to teach our defensive linemen that. You can use pop-ups to be the blockers, so then they have to identify you, the coach, play the quarterback, so you can see if they're setting outside and inside cage properly. But that's another playlist presentation. Okay? So that's out of our base front, which is our 50 front, right? That's the one we play the most. Another front that we play versus 11, tight. Tight. Now we have a 9-3, 1, and a 5, right? So here's the rule, right? Designated block is the guard unless guard on the side of the call is covered, but so is the center. And we know that by the front, so it remains the guard. Okay? So now, still the defensive end is still the inside defender. Now speed rush, right? The first step is at that near hip, but then it's speed rushing into the B stab, right? Stab B gap. Step at the hip, but then it's speed rush up into B gap. Hard step here. So now what's the guard do on this one? We see mostly some kind of bob, which we call big on big, bob, right? It's either big on big or some type of a slide. You know, occasionally a man side, zone side. We get a big. So we're likely to get that, which puts tackle on rover. So then essentially, our looper now is going to be up in the A gap again. Okay? Going to be up in the A gap again. But that addresses the issue of the designated blocker. Guard, call side, unless, well, guard, call side, and centers, they're both covered. It remains guards, the designated blocker. Down here to the 10 personnel, we have what we call the split front. Okay? Split front, the rover's part of the front. Okay? So the rover lines up away from the back. That's all I'm going to talk about. You have to see my base fronts on a whiteboard playlist. So now here we go again, right? Guard, call side. Unless, well, the center's covered also in this front. We know that. So the guard remains the read. Okay? So it's a Ringo because the rover's right. First, second, step near hip, stab it, speed rush, hard outside step. So now what does the guard do? Again, what we usually see, big on big here. So now what that means, again, up in the A gap, right? Butt side rule. Butt side literally is to his butt. If he's facing this way, you go butt side, he's not going to block you with his butt, right? That's why we have that butt side rule. And then over here, purposely I have what we call an Amazon front. It's a definite 2-3 techniques is fantastic. It's a 41 box, 1, 2, 3. I didn't draw the inside linebacker, but we got one inside linebacker over the center, 41 box we call it. We get maximum pass coverage, and we get all kinds of ability to run different type of games. Okay, well, this brings in, did this on purpose, right? It's Ringo because Rover's on the right. This U game is called to the rover, but this also brings in, right? Defensive end or inside defender, rover or outside defender. The inside defender is the tackle. It's a fourth defensive lineman brought in. It's a pass rushing specialist. Defensive end is now the outside defender. So first, second. Now, right, guard is covered on call side, but the center's uncovered. So now the center becomes the designated blocker. See how that worked, right? Guard call side unless, right? Center's covered. Center's covered. Center's uncovered. Center becomes the designated blocker, which is the guy we read. So, right, first, step near hip, speed rush, B gap, right? Stab, speed rush, B gap. That's what the stab means. Boom. So now reading the center. What we have found, you get big on big both sides. The center is usually assigned, okay? The inside linebacker first, help second, okay? So because the center is further away, we say the only time, and this is a unique rule so the kids get it. When the center is the designated blocker, and we teach the kids who the designated blocker is based upon the front, so they know. They don't have to come out and think. Is it the guard? They know by the front. So from the day the front's installed, they're taught who designated blockers are. Okay? The center is straight back. Okay? Hard outside step, loop your A. The center is away, right? Obviously, loop your A. The only time when the center is the designated blocker that you would go the opposite A is following the butt rule. When he's looking to block you. When we say copper free field, which means be real tight, come right off his butt, just about skimming at his butt so you don't get too far. Okay, so when the guard is the designated blocker and he's even, you're staying on your side, right? And which is what you're doing here. I mean, you're going the other side, excuse me. But on this one here, because the center is one guy farther away, when the center does in fact stay even like that, then we say take your A. Take your A. Because it's that much farther to get in the opposite A. Okay? So that is the U pistol game, okay, versus using 4 different fronts. I've taught you how we teach our kids who the designated blocker is. It's always the guard call side unless the center is the uncovered guy, like I showed you here. Okay, and then you teach them how to tweak the rule when the designated blocker is even, when it's the center. Okay? So as I said at the beginning, to my subscribers, I thank you, and to those who haven't yet, I hope you do. What I'm saying to everybody now, please, any questions at all, reach out to me at CoachMJSullivan@gmail.com because I would love to talk football with you.